Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. That Brahman is infinite. This phenomenal world is also infinite. But this is only a projection of that. Nevertheless, if this is taken away, that remains infinite as before. Om. Peace to the individuals, peace to the planets, peace to the atoms. So we're studying the Isha Upanishad, and so far we've gotten through 2 verses. The first one was, in this changing world, everything is subject to change, yet everything is covered by the Lord. Practice renunciation and be strong in the consciousness of the self. Do not run after anyone's wealth. And a man may wish to live for 100 years, performing his duties as prescribed by the scriptures. O man, if you do your duties in this way, then the results of whatever you do will not cling to you. There is no other way. So these were the first 2 verses which we covered earlier. And as we mentioned before, as Shankara says, the first verse refers to renunciation, the second verse refers to leading a good life, to the path of karma. Now, in the first verse, it says to cover everything with Brahman, cover everything with God. It says, in this changing world, everything is subject to change, yet everything is covered by the Lord. Practice renunciation and be strong in the consciousness of the self. Do not run after anyone's wealth. So the idea here, like I said, this represents renunciation, but the idea is that normally we look outside ourselves and we see various objects. We see people, we see houses, we see cars, we see all these things, and then we look at those things. And we say, this looks good, I want to have this, or this looks bad, I don't want that. And like that, we're always involved in the outside world. And this is the ordinary life that most people live. They're concerned with their job, with their family, with their home, and all these things. And so all of our attention is focused outside of ourselves and seeing the various objects that are there in the universe without ever stopping to think, well, where did they come from? What are they really? Who are we really? And who am I really? And so, in this verse, it says, instead of looking at the objects and seeing this one's pretty, I like that, or this one's ugly, I don't like that, this person is pleasant, or this person is unpleasant, instead of reacting to the kind of scenes before you and the way they appear and saying, I like this and I don't like that, instead of that, you think in terms of where did they come from? What is their true nature? And we know, according to Vedanta, that really this world that we see is like waves in the ocean. The waves are different. Each and every wave is different. Some are big, some are small, they're different shapes and all. But yet, they're all ocean. Underlying all the waves is the one ocean. Now, when we're living at the wave level, we're living as a wave, and we may be a big wave, or we may be a small wave. We may be very successful in life, or we may be having all kinds of problems and difficulties and things. But when you go a little deeper, then you discover that behind each and every wave is this wonderful, glorious, infinite power and presence that's there. And so then the spiritual person, the person of renunciation, as I said, instead of going after all the objects, he sets up a relationship with the underlying unity, the underlying divinity of things, and then he operates according to that. Ordinary person, we look at the world and we see, okay, this is my family, these are my friends, these people are close to me, everybody else is kind of outside that. If our mother or our sister or brother comes to us, we give kind of special attention, that, oh, here's my brother, here's my sister. But the spiritual person, he doesn't think in terms, oh, this is my sister, this is my brother, and so on. He sees everything, oh, here's the Lord come in this form, here's the Lord come in this form. And then, when that happens, when a person begins to think like that, gradually the forms stop being pretty or ugly, pleasant or unpleasant, and they're just different manifestations of the Lord. And so he lives in a totally different state of consciousness. That normally, like I said, we're looking at the world, we're saying these things are the good things that I want, these things are the bad things that I don't want, and we're always struggling. Struggling, how can I get ahead of this person? How can I, make more money? How can I get a better garden than my neighbor? And like that, we're always kind of competing and struggling with the world. But as you move into this underlying consciousness, you're also moving into unity. And for a truly spiritual person, there's no difference between somebody gives me $100 or somebody gives you $100. It's the same self. You're myself in a different form. And so in other words, you're seeing in terms of the consciousness of the reality of individuals, which have all come out of the one consciousness, and you then, and you're no longer attaching so much importance to this particular consciousness. In truth, whether it happens to me or it happens to you, makes no difference, because the one consciousness is there in all beings, and it's working through all beings. And so this is this first verse, which is very well known and very important, gives a whole different kind of shape to it. It's not saying reject everything, everything is bad, everything is hateful, you should try to escape, It's saying that rather put yourself in the right frame of consciousness. And then you see the world's fine, the world's not world is fine. The spiritual person goes into meditation, he forgets all about the world, doesn't even remember it's there, gets absorbed in meditation. When he comes out of the meditation, then he says, oh, thank God is here. And like that, it's a total transformation, which is of consciousness, where the person is no longer ego-driven, always seeking his own kind of benefit, but is now living kind of out of that one consciousness. And this is the message of Vedanta, of the Upanishads, is that there's really only one reality, only one being, one consciousness. As individuals, we exist as an individual with a particular body and a particular mind. And then we set a barrier and say, okay, this is me. And then we're all concerned with I, me, and mine, with my car and my house and so forth. And if we get a scratch on our new car, we're really upset. If somebody else gets a scratch on the car, they say, oh, okay, it happens. In other words, I mentioned this before, that you get this vast universe here, billions of stars, billions of galaxies, huge. 99% of our thought is about what's happening to me. And so our consciousness becomes so small, and so focused on this one particular individual, that we're completely unaware of anything else. But that same consciousness has the capacity to expand, to include all the universe, because all of the universe has come out of the one consciousness. And when that consciousness is connected with a particular body, a particular mind, and when it's reacting to various experiences that come, then it becomes small and it becomes individual. But when that consciousness gets back into its real nature, into who it really is, then you discover that you're unfolding this vast, infinite divinity, this eternal divinity that's there within you, begins to unfold and reveal greater and greater kind of levels of divinity. And then the need for any kind of money or home or car, all these things, you just don't need them anymore. They're like a child's toy. When we were children, we had our favorite toy, and we would cry if it was broken or somebody took it away. But as an adult, you say, okay, there's my old doll, fine. But it doesn't interest us anymore. We've outgrown it. And this is spiritually, on the spiritual level, people gradually outgrow all the petty bickering and fighting and squabbling that goes on in this world. You just gradually move above that. And began to realize that there's such a small thing, that there's such greater things here. So this is the path of renunciation, of not rejecting everybody, of shunning everybody or everything, but rather realizing that everything is a manifestation of the divinity, but focusing on that underlying divinity, that underlying oneness. And this is when Swami Vivekananda, when he started the Ramakrishna mission, he used to tell his brother monks, smear God over everything. Traditionally, the sannyas and monks, they would go off to the forest. They would completely shun human society and kind of keep away from everything, say that's Maya, that's illusion, and so on. And then they would try to realize God, inside. And there was and then when you had that, actually there's kind of a conflict there. But when you begin to put the thought, the presence of God in everything, whether you're meditating or whether you're working, if you can keep the thought and the presence of God there, then gradually everything becomes spiritual. As consciousness develops, we find that the presence of God is there in everything, and every place we're at, it becomes sacred, and everything we do, it becomes worship. So this was the first verse, talking about that idea. But now for most people, that's a little too hard to do. And so, they're interested in the world. They're interested in accomplishing things and so forth. And so the second verse then was more or less for the more ordinary people. And it says that a man may wish to live for 100 years, performing his duties as prescribed by the scriptures. Well, man, if you do your duties in this way, then the results of whatever you do will not cling to you. There is no other way. Now, last week we talked about how in Hinduism, there are 4 basic goals in life, known as Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha. Artha means wealth, or prosperity, possessions. Kama means desire, fulfilling desires. Dharma means righteousness, doing things ethically and morally. And then finally, Moksha means liberation, attaining your oneness with God. And so these 4 goals, for the average ordinary person, these 4 goals were there. The average person, he needs to have some artha, some wealth, some prosperity. You need to be able to have a roof over your head. You need to be able to have food and all these things. And so some prosperity has to be there. Secondly, there's desires. People have desires, and to some extent, they have to fulfill those desires before they're ready to move on beyond them. And this I mentioned last week. They say first comes bhoga, enjoyment, and then comes yoga, and then comes renunciation. And I mentioned last week how if you've got a beggar living on the street, and he's looking in the window of this 5-star restaurant, and he's seeing all the people dining in there, he'll be thinking, oh, that looks so wonderful. If only I could go in there and have one of those meals. The next life, he comes back, and now he's a millionaire, and every day he gets gourmet food. And now after a while, it's just food. It's not a big deal anymore. And then he says, okay, whatever. And now his consciousness, he's ready to go on to something else. And so like that, people in the world, we're trying out different things. Saying, oh, this looks so good. Let me try this. Or that looks good. Let me have that. Until we get it, we're frustrated. We tend to be upset. But once we get it, then after some time we say, okay, I'm done with that, and now I'm ready to seek something better, something higher. And so for the average person, they have basic desires. To some extent, they have to fulfill those desires. Now, in the scheme of life, in Hinduism, a person was expected to go through 4 stages. As you remember, brahmacharya, which is studentship, kind of preparation for life. Then the grihastha, the householder life, where after you graduated from college or school, then now you're ready, you have a family, you get a job, you have a career, and you spend some years going through fulfilling all your duties in society. But then the third stage is called vanaprastha, meaning forest dwelling. Once a person's retired from his job, the children are gone, they've gone off, they got married, they've all gone off on their own. Now comes vanaprastha, forest dwelling, where the person is now supposed to start to think again seriously about spiritual matters, which is the real purpose of life. So a lot of people, they may do daily puja in their homes, things like that, or they read scriptures, certain scriptures, do bhajans, but you start turning your mind away from all the kind of the material concerns you had before, and start turning it more towards the spiritual direction. And then finally comes moksha, where you get completely absorbed, where you totally want to get the actual realization, the actual experience of God. So for the average person, would go through this process, and for that purpose, it's good to live 100 years, or have a long life, to be healthy, to have all the conditions of prosperity and so forth, that you'll have to have a fulfilled life. Then that's important. And so the Vedas themselves, as we talked about earlier, they're divided into two sections called Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda. The Vedas proper, the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, these, as we mentioned earlier, were the actual mantras and hymns and chants that were used by the priest as they did the yajnas, the worship. Now, the purpose behind the yajnas was to acquire things, to acquire worldly prosperity, to acquire heavenly prosperity, and so forth. There was a purpose behind it, and the yajnas were performed in order to gain that purpose. Like I said, in a way, it was like the science and technology of their day. In earlier days, men were surrounded by all kinds of forces that they had no control over. Drought, flood, disease, death, all these things were there. Lightning, all these things. And so in earlier days, people tended to think there were some kind of deities, some kind of devas or deities behind these various forces, and then they would try to propitiate the deities so that they would have good health, they would have prosperity, they would go to heaven. And so these yajnas were used kind of to achieve that. But along with the worship was sought various ends. Right? There was the Jnana Kanda, which is mainly you find in the Upanishads, which talks about the underlying spiritual reality of things. And his focus then is not on getting more cattle or longer life or good health. His focus is on realizing God, to get back to become reunited with God, to realize your oneness with God. And so these were the first two verses which we had covered before. Asaya namate loka adhira tamasat vrita tamste prityabi gachanti ye ke chat mahano jana. There are worlds known to be sunless and fit for demons. They are enveloped in darkness, such as what the blind, in other words, those devoid of self-knowledge, experience. Those people who have neglected the attainment of self-knowledge and have thus committed suicide, as it were, are doomed to enter those worlds after death. And the commentary says that this is a condemnation of people who do not try to attain self-knowledge. They are, in a real sense, committing suicide, for what can be worse than being a slave to sense enjoyment, completely oblivious of the real purpose of life, which is to be your own master. In order to be your own master, you have to realize that you are identical with Brahman, the cosmic self, that you are pure consciousness, ever free, without name and form, and unconditioned. You are not subject to any modification, without beginning and without end, beyond thought and speech. You are existence absolute, knowledge absolute, bliss absolute. When you know this, you are free. You no longer swing between birth and death. If you do not try to know who you really are, you are indeed committing suicide. You are inviting the ignominy of a slave's life in this world and a similarly unfortunate fate after death. So it says that those people who have not kind of sought higher spiritual development tend to go to the dark worlds, those worlds known to be sunless and fit for demons, where they are enveloped in darkness, such as what the blind experience. So this, often, you have the ideas of heaven and hell, and you have, also in Hinduism, the ideas of heaven and hell are there, and they speak of like 7 heavens, 7 higher realms, and 7 hells. Now, in Christianity, at least, in America, always going to talk about hell as a place of torture. You have hellfire, you have the burning pit, you have the devils poking you with pitchforks and all kinds of things going on. But actually what's meant is that those souls which are spiritual, kind of on the spiritual level, they're drawn to the light. Whereas those souls which are not spiritual, they want the darkness, they don't want the light. See, when realization comes, when the Spirit of God begins to come into life, it transforms the person. Up to a certain point, see, we're an ego. We're an individual, we're a small individual, and we may be a good person, or we may be a bad person. But we're basically this particular person, this particular ego. Now the light is the universal light. It is equally in everybody, and as it comes into a person's consciousness, gradually that smallness in the person's nature begins to dissolve. And eventually the person becomes infinite, like the divine. But the problem is that we don't want that. Now Swami, I think Vivekananda used to say that if you came to a fork in the road, in one side said God, in one side said a lecture about God. He said most people will go to the lecture because that doesn't bother you. You just listen to oh yes, that's nice, and you go home. But if you want God, there's a whole transformation that starts to take place, which every step of the way our little self will tend to fight it. And so this then is kind of created. So if the person who's begun to develop spiritually, who's yearning for God, who's really seeking God, that person is drawn to that light. And the more advanced he is, kind of the higher he goes. But the person who doesn't want that light, with all of its kind of its blessing and its revelation of divinity, and so the person who doesn't want that light, he's drawn away from it. Yeah, I remember when we were in Hyde Park, sometimes if you go down to the kitchen at 2 o'clock in the morning and you turn on the light, the various books would all run and scurry for the darkness. Well, like that, the demons are like that. The light comes and right away they go running, scurrying for darkness. And because they're covered in darkness, they don't have any sense of sympathy or compassion or things like that for other people. And the lower they go, the more darkness they have, the less they're in tune with the unity of things, and less sympathy or understanding they have of other people, and they can become, even sadistic or other things. So the idea is that in Hinduism, there's no devil there, there's no Satan, there's no torture, but simply it's light or darkness, and each soul, depending on its nature, it moves either one way or the other. And in his behavior then, in this world, you have people on all different levels. Some very spiritual, some very good, sattvic people, kind, loving, noble, and other people who are extremely bad, like the mafia, people like that. People who enjoy torturing other people, just it's their idea of fun. And so, because they're covered, their consciousness is covered with ignorance, with darkness of ignorance. So when it talks of going to dark realms, it means those people who aren't seeking God, who don't want God, they go into various levels of darkness, of ignorance, of being unaware of the whole spiritual nature of reality and being shut out from the light. And the same way, those people who have been on the spiritual path, who have been seeking it, they want the light, and so that they're drawn to it. And so, like this, we tend to go kind of up and down, and that's right. And in the mythology, of course, in Hindu mythology, you have the ongoing, continuous battle between the gods and the demons, the Rakshasas and Asuras and things. And it's also the basic battle between good and evil. Now, this battle between good and evil, between the devas and the demons, is only within kind of the playground of this universe, which is made up of the pairs of opposites. As you know, and so in this universe, you have both good and you have both bad. And as an individual in this universe, we go up or down. Whether we can be better and better, or we can get worse and worse. But beyond this universe, with its pairs of opposites, is the divinity of the Atman, of the spirit within us, which is our real self, which is our true nature. That self, that Atman, is never affected by whatever's going on in the world. Just as we're never affected by what we happened to dream last night. Last night we may have a wonderful dream, we were flying or something, or we may have a terrible dream, a nightmare. But when we wake up, we say, oh, okay, I'm fine. And it doesn't, have any effect on us at all. It doesn't change us in any way. In the same way, this going to heaven, going to hell, these are all temporary things. A soul, according to its, they say, according to its karma, according to it goes, stays for some time in a particular celestial realm, and then it comes back to earth, takes birth again, and so forth. And even the gods, like Indra or Yama or things, they're like souls that have attained a great deal of spiritual development, but even in their case, eventually they come back and have to come back to earth. But the realized souls, the ones who have attained this this ultimate spiritual knowledge that you find in the Upanishads, is beyond all that. It's like this universe is like a game, and so souls come here to play, and the rules of the game are the laws of karma. When you do the right things, you're winning the game and you prosper. When you do the wrong things, then you're losing the game and you kind of go down. And so like that, the souls are coming here to play, but when they stop playing, when they get tired of it, then they begin to go back to the original divinity, the original divine thing from which they came in the beginning. And this is in the Bible. You have the story of Adam and Eve. In the beginning, Adam and Eve were in paradise because they were one with God. But then they ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. They kicked out of paradise. In other words, their consciousness got hold of this duality of good and evil, and then they lived in a whole different existence. Instead of being one with God, instead of being sustained with and aware of their oneness of God, they blocked that out, and then they began to experience this world with its good and its bad. And so, but when a soul gets tired of that, when it stops seeking, oh, I want to have this, and then I want to have that, and then I want to try that. When the soul stops kind of playing in the world, then it begins a return journey back to becoming aware of its oneness with God. It's like, Sri Ramakrishna gave the story that all the children were playing a game, and he said, the mother looks at them, and sees they're happy with their game, so she leaves them alone and goes about her housework. But he said, when one of the children gets tired of the game and begins to cry, then right away the mother comes and takes care of it. So like that, as long as God sees we're happy making money, we're happy doing this, we're happy doing that, he leaves us alone. And then when we though actually want God, then he begins to come, in his grace then begins to come into our life and gradually lift us kind of back up. And God, as all religions will say, God is infinite, totally without any limit, and all blissful. In the Hindus, Satchidananda. Infinite existence, infinite consciousness, awareness, and infinite bliss. That is within the source out of which the whole universe has come. That's within each and every person. But instead of that, we say, no, I want to do Mercedes, or I want to do this, or I want to have that. And so all the time we're involved in all these kind of little things and totally unaware. Like Swami Krishna said we're like children at the beach playing with pieces of colored glass. He said all the time in the ocean there's tremendously valuable gems there, but we don't bother to look there. We don't care about that. We're always involved in our little pieces of glass. And so this is the human existence. We have all the infinity, all the glory, love, wisdom, power of God within us, but yet we're here puttering around, doing different things. And so for the person who's still puttering around, you have the karma kanda. Through the yajnas and things, you can get prosperity in life, you can go to heaven, nicer celestial realms, and so forth. But for the person who's really got the yearning that I want to know truth, I want to know what's real, I want to know God, I want to be with God, I want to experience God, for that person, he then starts on the path of jnana kanda, of seeking to actually know God. And it's possible. For each and every person, because that's the reality of our being, of who we are, is God, is the divine Brahman consciousness. That consciousness is what we actually are. And so, no matter how bad we are, if we can realize that right away our sins of the baby scarlet, they become washed clean. In other words, that realization brings a transformation of consciousness, just like waking up from a dream. In a dream, you may be doing all kinds of bad things, but when you wake up, it doesn't have any more hold on you. And so, all the guilt, the fear, all these things, they all go away. So and through these practices, through living your life, through experiencing things and gradually kind of growing and learning through life and developing, at some point, a person gets a taste of what spiritual life is. And this is kind of the key point. Because until then, it's all abstract. Most of the people who are religious, who go to church regularly, everything, I've never had any experience of God or what the Bible or the scriptures are talking about. And they don't have the drive that we have. I mentioned before how in order to gain success in the world, people work tremendously hard. They study for years in college. They work long hours and really because they can see that, if I do all this, I'm going to have a very successful career, I'm going to have a very successful life, and they can see, that this is worth sacrificing for. It's like the Olympic athletes. They train so hard, but because they can see, maybe I can win the gold medal. And so, like that, if the things in this world that we see are very concrete, and so people will work extremely hard in order to get there. But often, when we come to the spiritual life, in spiritual practice, it's all kind of vague and abstract. Yes, there's God. Yes, this is what I should be doing, and so on. But we don't really need it. We don't really have that drive. And so we go through our practices and things, but we're not overly upset that we haven't realized God. Swami Krishna said that men shed a jug of tears for their wife and business and home and everything else. He said, if anybody could yearn for God the way they yearn for things in the world, they would find God. And so Swami Varadananda, one of his disciples, said that people study so long in school, study so hard and for over such a long time, he said, if anybody worked that hard to realize God, they'd realize it. So now we can have the capacity, every person has the capacity to actually realize God, to experience this underlying divinity of things, but normally we don't really have that urge or that desire, that need for it. It's only when a person is through his meditation practices and something happens. A little glimpse comes or something, and you realize, oh, there's actually something there. And you realize that what you're getting out of your practice, your meditation, and so on, is actually something very good. Then you get drawn into it. A person may start meditating just in order to reduce stress or something, but when he begins to actually get the point of feeling peaceful, feeling together, feeling in much better shape than before, then slowly he's drawn into it. And in time, that practice, that spirituality, it becomes the most important thing in your life. And this is when you really start to move, along the spiritual path. As long as it's just kind of a hobby, well, you get benefit, but you won't really get that far. But those who have begun to get drawn into it, it gradually absorbs everything else, and everything else, money, things like that, they just are kind of forgotten. They become unimportant. So according to our nature, according to our kind of interest, we have the capacity to be drawn to the light or be drawn away from it. Vanesha dekam mamaso javiyo maima deva apnuvan purva varsat tadhatvato yama jyeti tishtat tasminapo matarishva tadati. So Brahman is one without a second. It never moves, yet it goes faster than the mind. It is always ahead. The sense organs can never catch up with it. It is still, yet it defeats all in a race. By its power, the Lord who dwells in space upholds water and everything else in the phenomenal world. So this is verse 4. In the commentary, says that Brahman, the self, is one without a second, complete in itself. It never moves, it is always still, always the same, yet it moves faster than the mind. It is the power that moves everything, and it makes the whole world go the way it does. He gives power to the Lord of the universe, Matarishva, the Lord who dwells in space, who is responsible for the operation of the principle of cause and effect. There is no way of describing Brahman. It is beyond thought and speech. It is everywhere and in everything. It is formless, yet every form is its form. It is nameless, yet every name is its name. It is in fact unique. To emphasize this, the Upanishad makes contradictory statements. In one breath, the Upanishad says Brahman is still, anesha, and in the next breath it says it goes faster than the mind, manaso javiyo. What does it mean by this? The answer is, Brahman has two aspects. In one aspect it is without attributes, nirguna. It is the Absolute. It is pure consciousness, pure chaitanya. It is then existence absolute, knowledge absolute, bliss absolute. It is the cosmic self, Paramatma. In another aspect, Brahman is with attributes or saguna. It is then in its relative aspect. In this aspect it may have a form, and it may also have many qualities, good and bad, small and big, and so on. There are an infinite variety of such qualities. These, it should be remembered, are mere attributes, mere superimpositions, adhyasa. They cannot affect Brahman. They are like masks children wear. The mind itself is inert. It can function only when the self, in other words the Atman, which is another name of Brahman, animates it. He cannot move faster than the self because it is the self that makes it move, and that self is everywhere. This also applies to all other organs, called devas because they reveal, of the body. And this applies to all of the elements of nature. It is the power that works behind the cause as well as behind the effect. So take the case of air. When it is associated with the self, air is called the life force. But air by itself cannot sustain life. Air is also called Matarishva because it moves about, sva, in space, Matari. But it becomes active when it is associated with the cosmic self. It then becomes Hiranyagarbha, the first manifestation of Brahman as an individual, or Sutratma, the cosmic self of all, like the thread passing through a garment. It is in this aspect that Brahman controls every phenomenon in nature. From fear of it, fire burns. From fear of it, the sun shines. From fear of it, Indra and Vayu, and death the fifth run, from the Isha Upanishad. So nothing can happen independent of Brahman, yet nothing affects it. The whole phenomenal world, including everything in it, is derived from Brahman, is sustained by it, and in the end dissolves it. So Brahman is one without a second. It never moves, yet it goes faster than the mind. It is always ahead. The sense organs can never catch up with it. It is still, yet it defeats all in the race. By its power, the Lord who dwells in space upholds water and everything else in the phenomenal world. So after the first three verses then, he gives a description of Brahman, of the ultimate reality or ultimate truth they're talking about. And Brahman has the two aspects, as you know. It's got the transcendent aspect and the immanent aspect. In this universe, you have all kinds of individuals. Individual people, animals, insects, microbes, everything there. They're all expressions of God. And they all come out of what's called Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic mind. It's like everybody, every individual are actually ideas in the mind of God. And then God is consciousness. He is aware of that, so God is experiencing, Hiranyagarbha is experiencing everything all the different beings in the universe experience. And so that he's experiencing through me, he's experiencing through you. In other words, there's one self, one consciousness looking through all the eyes and seeing everything that's there. Now, in our ego state, in our individual state, we identify with this particular manifestation and what it is experiencing. But it's possible to actually move deeper in consciousness and then become connected with that universal consciousness, which pervades the whole universe. And that universal consciousness is our real self. Now, in polytheism, or in I think pantheism, anyway, they say that God has become the universe. But actually that's not true. The universe is there, and all the different beings and objects and things in the universe are there. God is within them as the innermost self, the innermost consciousness within each being, but he's never actually become the being. He's still God, he's still Brahman. He's still completely something different, and still in his all true infinite nature, totally unaffected by what goes on in the world. But yet aware of it at the same time. And so that type of consciousness comes as a person becomes more and more detached, getting more and more into what's called the Sakshi, the witness consciousness. That consciousness comes, where the body is there, and this actually some realized souls or mystics, described as a state where the body is acting, is walking, talking, is handling social situations, is doing everything, but yet the person, the mystic, is totally uninvolved in it. He's aware of it, but he's totally not at all connected with it. And like that, even though Brahman is aware, kind of experiencing through everything in the universe, at the same time, he is still Brahman, and he's still in his own nature. And so this is the idea, and that because all of nature, all the universe at every level, heavens and hells, every level, because all of this is contained within Hiranyagarbha, the mind of God, therefore everything is within God. Everything is God is everywhere. God is omnipresent. We talked before how when you think of creation, you can think of a mental creation of, say, the artist or the author who creates a book. He creates a whole world full of all kinds of characters and actions and things going on, or a play. Now that world is not a separate object that's put out there somewhere, like a painting. That world is contained within the consciousness, within the mind of the writer. And because of that, that world exists. Now, if the characters in that particular book were to begin to search within their world to find out who made me, they could examine every person, every object within that world, within their fictional world. They could examine everybody, and they won't find anybody who made them. But yet, all the time, their creator, their maker, is right there, because they're contained within the consciousness of the creator. And so, like that, this world, this universe, seems to be something else, gets as separate objects and things, separate individuals, and we search this world. Looking, where's God? Where did he make? We go to temples, we go to mountains, we consult people, we consult holy people. Now, we see someone, an incarnation, like Krishna, or Jesus Christ, or Ramakrishna, and we say, oh, there, Jesus Christ, that's God. But actually, Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, is only a man of human form, but the consciousness that's within that form is God's consciousness. And this is the thing, within each and every one of us is that same God consciousness. The difference between us and a sage, or us and a great spiritual person, is that we're not aware of it. We're only aware of our particular kind of form, our particular identity. But when we get deep within, we discover, oh, here's the one universal consciousness out of which all things have come. Here is what made me, and here is what made everybody else. And we live in that consciousness. You know, in the Gita, when Arjuna asked Krishna to take his chariot out between the two armies to look at things, basically, Arjuna represented a human being. He thought of himself, I'm Arjuna, and I'm looking out, and I'm seeing the armies on both sides, and I'm seeing all the destruction that's about to happen, and I'm very upset by it. Krishna, on the other hand, he looked exactly like any other human being, had arms and feet, he ate, he slept, he talked, he did all things like an ordinary human being, but his consciousness was completely different. His consciousness was the divine consciousness. And that's what separates the sage from the ordinary person. The ordinary person, we are totally involved with our particular identity and the experiences we're going through and so forth. The sage has realized the underlying reality of where all this came from. He realizes it's not in a person or a thing I like, it's the one chit, the one consciousness that pervades everything, and then so he's totally transformed by that experience. He's no longer a simple individual, he's now is becoming more and more one with the divine. So anyway, so we got to 4 verses now. Yeah, 4 verses now. So any questions? on anything we cover.
Swamiji, who decided, who experienced that the Brahman doesn't change?
But this is what those who have experienced Brahman, this is what they say. First of all, and they also say, at the same time, though, they say it is indescribable. Changes happen within Sagura Brahman, within the universe, right? And there can be, this universe is considered only a drop in the ocean. This whole universe is like a tiny drop in the ocean of Brahman. But in Brahman's own nature, they say it never changes, and but they also say it's indescribable. You can't put it into words or any kind of concepts that we can grasp. For one thing, in Brahman, there's no time and there's no space. We have a sense of change because we have a sense of time. Things are different today than they were yesterday, but in pure Nandus, there's just there's no the sense of change. This is coming from the mind. The mind says, oh, this is what I was yesterday, I remember that, and now today this is where I am now today, and so we have this sense of change. But when you go beyond mind, what you get into is something that is beyond change. So this is another thing that almost all the mystics agree on, is when you hit the spiritual level, when you reach the spiritual level, there's no space and there's no time. Like right now, we have a sense of space because our sense organs and all this is how we perceive things. But actually, there's no space there. In your dream or in your imagination, you may imagine you're in a vast hall full of people and everything else, but how much space does that actually occupy? None. It's just like a mental image in your mind. This world that we experience is also like a mental image in the cosmic mind. But when you get to the underlying thing, then there's neither space nor time, and therefore no change.
So, what is the important significance for a human being, Maharaj, for this important point?
This is, through this, God is experiencing things. He's one, but through creation, He's experiencing being many and interacting and all the different things. And basically, each soul is like an idea in the mind of God that goes out, and then it goes through all kinds of different experiences, and eventually it gets absorbed by, becomes one with God again. And in between, there's kind of an interesting story. It's called Lila. They say you can't say why God created the universe. There's no why about it. It's just something to do. It's just, you're God, so you can create the universe. Why? The human mind does the thing with a motive. I'm doing this because I want to achieve this. But when there's no mind, when there's just, then how do you explain it? So.
Maharaj, there was last week in the University of Chicago, you might have heard, there was a professor came from Cambridge University.
Oh yeah, the one I heard about. Yeah,
yes, his name is Professor Christopher Bailey.
Yeah.
He mentioned one point. Many people asked questions. I asked him only at the end when everybody was left. Yeah. I was curious. The question that I asked, he first said that other religions of the world, there was a time when other religions, by that he meant Christianity, Judaism, Islam, etc. He said that those religions were global in nature. Global in nature. Whereas Hinduism, he didn't use the word Vedanta, he used the word Hinduism, was a dream religion, was a mystical religion. And that's why it was not accepted by many Europeans as the global religion. Somebody asked a question, when the question answer started, that Professor, what is the criteria or what is the criterion of a global religion? To which he never answered. I was waiting for that one, that he mentioned the word global religion many times, but he never answered what are the criteria of a global religion. Then, when he finished the lecture, I asked him, I said, sir, this topic of this, your lecture was Hinduism before Swami Vivekananda and Hinduism after Swami Vivekananda. To my knowledge, before Swami Vivekananda, the religion was Vedanta, and that represented by Sri Ramakrishna. And after Swami Vivekananda was also Vedanta, because he was the follower of Sri Ramakrishna. Why didn't you mention Vedanta at any time? And to which he answered, Dr. Bhatia, I'm not a religious person. I am a historian. So that's why I discussed only the history of Hinduism. And now, I said, do you accept now Hinduism as a global religion or not? Tell me yes or no, and why not, or why yes. He said, now the world accepts Hinduism as a global religion. I said, but still you have not answered the question, what are the criteria of a global religion? How do you determine that a religion, a given religion, is a global religion? It is all a definition which was made up by Europeans, and you apply that one to a particular religion. Perhaps Hinduism to you or to many Europeans looked like a European, to look like a mystical religion or a dream religion, and perhaps you didn't like the dream or the mystical things. But all religions are mystical religions. All religions are, if you look at Christianity, I said, Jesus Christ said, kingdom of God lives within your heart. Is that not a dream? Have you ever measured, have you ever seen where the kingdom of God does it live there? Have you estimated that one? Have you measured? He said, I have no answer to that question. I said, to some extent, all religions are mystical religions. If you go back truly, it's a mystical. But you look at the objective aspect of the phenomenon of the world, and you say, this is not abstract, but this is abstract. So anything which is abstract becomes a mystical to you, and anything which is concrete is not mystical to you. So the world has determined or measured religions on the basis of what is concrete and what is not concrete, which I just mentioned, what is Brahman and what is not, and what is changeable and what is not subject to variation. I said, if you look at that one, then that becomes a criteria. At that time, and still now, many religions in the world are mystical in the sense that you cannot measure them in certain kind of a concrete criteria. There is no concrete criteria. If you look at that one this way, then your question, the whole thing of global religion, there is no definition. What is your definition? Still, I have not been able to see. So, Maharaj, this was the discussion which was taking place almost 1 hour. People were talking about. And at the end, when I said that before Swami Vivekananda was Vedanta, and after Swami Vivekananda is Vedanta. So, it is still the same. So, you have not given me anything new that I should go back home and say that, yes, today I learned something new. He said, Dr. Bhatia, I'm not a religious person, I'm a historian. So I have discussed the history of religion, and that's all I know.
Well, you know, this is the University of Chicago tends to be like that. They get people who are very good scholars, but no religion, no. Like Wendy Doniger, she is no doubt a Sanskrit expert and everything, but
yes.
She has no. And in the past too, other people from the University of Chicago, kind of the same way. They're very first-rate scholars of Sanskrit, but they have no interest in the spiritual.
I didn't want to offend him, but I did mention, I said, whether consciously or unconsciously, Professor Bailey, you have ignored my question. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm sorry, I don't know that.
And he probably doesn't care either.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions about anything? So this was, as Dr. Butch was talking about, the last year the University of Chicago initiated or founded the Swami Varadananda Chair of Indian Philosophy or something, and so this was like the first lecture in the series.
Right.
And really, he followed the kind of typical that you get a very good scholar, probably, but
Right.
not at all, no interest in spiritual. So anyway, so now, today is Friday. Okay, tomorrow night we have Ramnam. Today, Swami Isha Upanishad, he's gone to Champaign-Urbana, University of Illinois. He'll be back late tonight. Tomorrow he goes to Ann Arbor and Detroit, so he won't be here for the Ramnam in the evening. And he also won't be here for the Sunday talk. So on Sunday, it's Mahavir Jayanti. Mahavir was considered the founder of Jainism. So Shuddha Gupta is going to do like a PowerPoint presentation on Mahavir, I guess, on Jainism, and for the Sunday talk, and then afterwards they'll serve food. And then on Tuesday, Swami Isha Upanishad is going to give a special talk on Hanuman, because it's also Hanuman Jayanti coming up. And I think there'll be food served after that too. And then after that, the regular programs and all going on. Every Sunday at 11 o'clock, Swami is speaking on why we should meditate. On Tuesday at 7:30, he does a regular class on the Panchama-Veda, the Gospel of Sri Krishna. On Friday, we're doing the Upanishads, and right now doing the Isha Upanishad. And then, the time of arati in the evening has been changed to 7 o'clock, because it's supposed to be done right around sunset, and so it's, probably actually getting dark now. Om Asatoma Sagyaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityuramam Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. Oh, peace, peace, peace.